Hello, this is this week's episode of the Eagles. I'm Tyler,
And I'm Cameron.
and we're here, and we're in the cafeteria today.
Yeah, we're trying to get a quiet space.
A little quiet spot for us to really talk into y'all, the viewers.
Get a little intimate, a little
A
cozy.
little intimate
Yeah.
on this early Friday morning.
It's very early.
Very early, but we're here, and we got some great news to share with y'all.
What's that great
Interesting
news?
news.
Interesting news, I think.
I believe the Keystones, right?
Sure.
Keystones are slowly approaching. We have some news on how this school has performed in recent years and like test scores and like what the principals and
What he
like,
thinks is going to happen for this year,
the
too.
principal,
Yeah, we have 2 interviews about the Keystone, but I think
Correct.
the first one we're going to watch is with Mr. Roth, our new
Correct.
principal.
Correct.
We love him up in the comm center.
Yeah, he's very welcome. He's always in there. I think he loves us too. He loves coming in there. He loves being interviewed.
Yeah, and he has some good information
To
share.
Very
So
good information.
We should go check that out.
Definitely, y'all should go check that out and see how our school's doing on the Keystones.
Hi, I'm Maya Humphreys here with Principal Roth, and today we're going to talk about the Keystone exam scores. How are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. So first and foremost, what are Keystones?
So the Keystone exams are state-mandated tests in literature, algebra 1, and biology. And the Keystones were initially created to take the place of the high school PSSA, which long before you got to high school, students used to take in 11th grade. So now we have 3 exams. The state's initial plan was that they would have tests in a lot more subject areas. That plan has since gone away, and the Keystone exams are intended to be graduation requirements.
What is the importance of these exams?
I think it's twofold. I think that the probably most important piece of the Keystone exams from a public perspective is it's a chance to see how schools do. It is a chance to see how much we are able to master the content in Algebra 1, in literature, and in biology. But from a student's perspective, it's also a chance to show off. It's a chance to show what you've learned. And showing off what you've learned doesn't necessarily mean that you have to get a perfect score on the test. In fact, nobody does. So it's a good chance to show what you've learned, and it's good data for us to use as a school to see what we can do better.
Okay. Why do you think that the scores are moving the way they are?
So comparing our scores statewide is a little more complicated than it would sound. So if we look at last year's scores compared to the year before, across the state, scores have been declining. So the average score statewide is declining. And in algebra, our scores went up very slightly, 1/10 of a point, but statewide those scores went down about 2 points. So I'm a big fan of looking at growth. How much is the school growing? How much are our students growing? As compared to saying, 90% of students in school A maybe are proficient on a test, 70% in school B. I feel like the real test is if we were at 70% last year, can we get to 71? The state as a whole was not able to do that. But in algebra, the school was able to grow a little bit. In biology, the school declined slightly, but the state declined more. So I look at that and see that we outpaced what the rest of the state did in terms of continuous growth. Literature, we took a step back last year, but there's positives to the literature score as well, which have more to do with PVOS, which is something that we can talk about later, as compared to the overall rate of students who passed the assessment.
Why do you think that the scores are moving the way they are?
I think as a whole, if you look at the way that the scores have changed over the last 3, 4, 5 years, you're moving in a really positive direction. And I know that I started looking at Norristown scores as an outsider, as someone who worked at a different school and wanted to know if this was a place that I wanted to call home. And I saw great gains. I saw a school that really does things that most other schools would be jealous of, to be honest. A lot of times people look at how many students in your school are English language learners. That's a really tough population as a whole to get proficient on the test. Norristown does much better than the rest of the state than in terms of that area. Students in special education, same thing. Norristown does a really nice job of educating students who have, different needs. And I think, we are a school district that is diverse, not just racially, but also in terms of socioeconomics. And most schools that have that type of diversity really struggle to get students to do well, particularly in reading. Norristown area high schools had continuous growth in that area. So while we took a step back in that area last year, as a whole, we're still doing better than we did several years ago, which is a great sign.
Do you think the students' performance on Keystones reflects what they do in the classroom?
No, not at all. When the Keystone exams first became a thing, the state of Pennsylvania wanted the state college system to adopt them, much like I believe they do in New York and in California. And the state college system had no interest in doing that because they did not believe that it was indicative of what you can do in the classroom. The tests are important. I won't say that they're not, but they're also sort of arbitrary. I was a social studies teacher. I think social studies is really important. According to the state Keystone system, it's not. I don't think that biology is any more important than U.S. history or chemistry or physics. So in that sense, it's arbitrary. And I don't think that a student who scores 3 points below proficiency on the Keystone exams is not prepared for college, because many, many students in Norristown and outside of Norristown have proven that to be wrong.
There's always predicted scores, so how do they make them up?
So the state uses a system that's called PVAS. And PVAS takes your scores from the last 3 years. Really for a high school student, it would be based on your PSSA in 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. And there's problems with that as well. The state changed the PSSA a few years ago, and when they did, schools really struggle. If you look at middle school and elementary school scores across the state, they are really, really low. And that's because statewide, I want to say it's only about half of students are able to do well on those tests. They're using those scores to predict how you'll do on the Keystones. All that being said, I think there is some value to the PVAS system. And so what I'm always looking at, and what I want our teachers to look at, is can we take your predicted score and beat it? And whether that means that you are basic, proficient, or advanced, I care much more about outpacing your predicted score than I do about you reaching a certain level on that test. And in the area of literature, where our score overall dropped, our PVAS score is the 36th best in the state of Pennsylvania out of, I forget how many schools, but it puts us at the 13th percentile. A lot of schools would love to be where we are, even though our proficiency score might be lower than those other schools.
When students fail the Keystones, can they take remediation classes?
You can. According to the state of Pennsylvania, you can retake the Keystone exam until the end of your junior year. At the end of your junior year, you cannot take the Keystone exam any longer. So at the Norristown Area High School, if you're not proficient in one of those exams, then you go into a Keystone remediation course where we just go back and strengthen the skills that maybe we didn't get strengthened the first time around. Many students who are not successful, and successful is a bad word, are not proficient. Many successful students are not proficient on these tests. They miss by just a few questions. You need a score of 1,500 to be proficient or to pass. Many students fall within the 1480s, 1490s. And so if we can just sharpen those skills in a few small areas, we can get you over the hump.
What is a school performance profile?
The school performance profile is a report card for all intents and purposes. People that are not in schools every day, they want a grade of how our schools do. Some states, I know Florida, I believe they still do, they give letter grades. So your school gets an A, a B, a C, a D. Pennsylvania never had that type of a system. And so they created a system where schools are graded from a score of 0 to 100. There's a few schools who actually get above 100 because there's extra credit that you can get. And we were able to, with those scores, seemingly compare school to school. There's problems with that though. The system is much more convoluted than it seems. So a lot of the, for instance, the 3 tested areas, they're not graded equally. Literature carries more weight than algebra and biology. So for a school like us, where last year we took a bit of a hit on our literature score, had we taken that hit in algebra instead of literature, our score would be higher. There's also factors like closing the achievement gap. That sounds really simple, right? That's something that we all want to do. We want students to do well in classes regardless of gender, race, religion, ethnicity, language. seemingly to the public, the closing the achievement gap figure says how well we're doing there, except it is a really convoluted formula that many schools that people would never think twice about them not being good schools, their scores take a big hit because they're not able to score in that area either.
How are the teachers going to prepare for the students more this year?
I think they're going to continue to do the same things that they've always done, and that's really focusing on the basics. When it comes down to it, we introduce a lot of really fancy things into schools, right? You're on Chromebooks, and there's smart boards, and there's new textbooks, and when it comes down to it, the things that you're learning in school are the same things that I learned when I was in school, and I know I'm really old. I learned how to read, I learned how to analyze, I learned how to think critically, to ask questions, and your teachers are doing that same thing. So as much as, yes, we're always looking for new ways to teach, what we also want to do is make sure that when you get to your freshman year of college and they send you to the bookstore to buy a $150 psychology book, you know how to dig into that book. That's hard. It's hard to do. It's something that as a student right now I still struggle with. So our teachers are just going to keep focusing on the basics, focus on analyzing text, analyzing things like political cartoons and artwork, thinking critically, not just in terms of literature, but in algebra, and realizing that our job is to make you successful in college, in a career, in the military, not to get you to pass the Keystone exam.
Can you explain a little about the College Ready score?
Sure. So the College Ready benchmark is a combination of two things. How many of our students score what is deemed to be the College Ready score on the SAT and or the ACT? So in order for, and that's a hard mark to make, so hard in fact that to get a perfect score on the school performance profile in that area, 40% of your students have to reach that mark. That may not sound very high, but you also have to remember that it's over 50% of students who enter college, especially at the community college level, require remedial courses. So they're not necessarily college ready, but that doesn't mean they won't be successful. So here at the Norristown Area High School last year, there were great gains in terms of how many students showed on the SAT, on the ACT, that they were ready for college level material.
Have they been increasing or decreasing?
Last year was a big jump. The score went from something in the low 30s to a 55, which if we could get gains like that in every area, if any school could get gains like that in every area, the governor would be down here telling us how great we did. In fact, folks like that should come and see how great we do, because you guys do great work.
As a new principal, is there anything you're going to do to increase these scores?
When I first got here, I talked a lot about pride. I think that the more we focus on being proud of who we are, being proud to be Norristown Eagles, continuing to build the culture and the climate in this school that is really growing leaps and bounds month by month. And that doesn't mean that there wasn't a great culture here before I got here. But I think the more that we take pride in our work, the more that we analyze data. I don't need necessarily for you to analyze data. I need to analyze your data. I need, when you take those tests, if we don't look at the results and see what you know and what you don't know and what we can do better, then we've wasted your time when you sat down to take those tests. The CDTs, we have students right now sitting and taking the CDTs in algebra so that we can look at that information and see what is it that they need help with. If I equate that to, coaching, when I was a basketball coach, I had some players who they were great at defense, they were great at dribbling, they were great at, layups, and they could dunk a basketball, but they couldn't make a foul shot. So I analyze that, and then I work with them on foul shots. And if I can make that better, I'm going to make them a better player. That's what I'm going to work with your teachers on, and it's not new to them. It's stuff that they've been doing. We're just going to keep doing it over and over and over again, try not to introduce too many new things, and really just instill that confidence and pride so that when you sit down to take that test, you're just worried about doing what I said before, showing off what you already know.
How do we account for the decrease in scores in literature?
I'll be honest, it's a little puzzling to me. So our proficiency rate dropped, I believe, 11 points from 2016 to 2017. However, when you look at that PVOS number, the growth compared to how our students were projected to do, we were one of the top 36 schools in the state of Pennsylvania. So when I first saw those two numbers, they really don't match up to me. It's confusing to me. So much so that I didn't believe the numbers when I first saw them. So I kept reviewing over and over and over again. Is that drop really accurate? So I can't sit here right now and tell you exactly why we dropped 11 points. What I will tell you is this, that growth, we're going to continue to sustain. And if we sustain that growth and improve upon that growth, then what we will do is keep in your English classes, in your social studies classes, even in your math classes, your science classes, your art classes, your business classes, pretty much everything. We're just going to keep honing in on the skills that we need. So on the surface, literature is a fairly simple thing. You pick up a book, you read it, you understand the plot, right? And so on the PSSA in 3rd and 4th grade, they're asking you to understand plot, understand main idea. However, on the Keystone exam, they want far more than that. They want you to do complicated things like understanding bias in a nonfiction article. We can teach that really well in a social studies classroom using current events or looking at newspapers from World War II. We can do that in literature, we can do that in science. We're just going to keep working on what we know is going to make students successful. I don't think that you're going to see that score stay where it is. I think that score is going to go back to where it was because the Norristown Area High School, with the exception of last year, had a steady upward path of success on that literature test. We're just going to return to that.
Okay. How does the school performance profile actually impact the community?
I think it is the easiest way for someone to judge a school. Whether they're judging us rightly or wrongly, that number published in the paper, on TV, on the state website, it compares us to other schools. So there is so much pride in Norristown. So many people who, the students who are here are 3rd, 4th generation Norristown High School students, Norristown Area High School students, that people want to see that we're as successful as everyone else. I think it's on us to make sure that people know that that score is only one small part of what we do. There are so many things within that score that show how successful we are. Our graduation rate, the number of students who graduate in 4 years, this doesn't count people who maybe take a 5th year, which is not uncommon anywhere. We're almost at 90%. That's a really, really good number, especially with some of the challenges that we face. I think that we do a really good job there. Our attendance rate is amazing. Our attendance rate continues to grow. And so I think that it's on us to show that, yes, that score, that's important. That goes into my evaluation. The state uses that. My boss is going to use that to say, how good am I at my job? Your teachers, every last one of them, that score figures into how they are graded as teachers, whether that is right or wrong. And the best teacher in this school and the most average, because we don't have any awful teachers. So the best and the most average teacher, they both get that same score going into their evaluation. So they care about it, I care about it, and yes, the community is going to look at that. Real estate folks are going to look at that. Our job, as people are trying to sell Norristown, to show the growth that we have, to show how awesome this place is to show the pride that we have in the school, to show the numbers inside of that score, and to make sure people know what we're doing to continually grow this school and to show off all the talents that our students have.
Is there anything you would like to add about the Keystones?
I won't lie and say that I don't care about the scores, because I do, right? As soon as they're available, I'm looking them up, I'm analyzing them, I'm trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong, what can we do better. But I also don't want for anyone, whether you're at the Norristown Area High School or a different high school, elementary school, middle school, to put too much stock in a number. Our school performance profile score is a 68.8. Last year it was a 77. I don't think that this school is 9 points less successful than it was the year before. In fact, I think this school continues to grow by leaps and bounds. And I think that the numbers that go into creating that score are misleading. Yes, we have work to do. There's no doubt about it. We're going to continue to get better. And even if our score was 105 and we were #1 in the state, we would still look to improve. But I don't want for folks to look at that 68.8 and think that that is indicative of who we are, because it's not. And I think the more that you look around at different schools, a lot of school scores will surprise you. Some schools have scores that are much lower than many people would think. And it's not because they're not as successful as people think they are. It's because of the formula. Now, the state is also changing the formula, and we may never get a school performance profile score again. So what they're going to do is to do something called the Future Ready PA Index, which is going to take all this information, it's going to put it out there for everyone to look at, but it's going to take that score away. So when that score comes away, there's positives and negatives. The positives are nobody's going to just look at the 68.8 in the newspaper and say, oh, this is where Norristown ranks compared to everyone else. It's now our job to make sure that everyone understands all that information that's available and understands what we're doing to keep making your educational experience better.
I'm Maya Humphreys, here with Principal Roth, and we talked about the past Keystone exam scores.